Okay. How's everyone doing? You don't look thumbs up. You look exhausted. A little exhausted? Okay. Is it a late night? Not enough sleep? Or just too early? Long day yesterday. Disaster? Oh, that is a minor disaster. Yeah, especially today, since we're going to be like looking stuff up online. You'll want to look over somebody's shoulder, I guess. So we're all kind of meh today. A lot of people are not here. I make a joke every year about this photo of Jasper and how like this is where everyone is at this time of the semester. Including your professors, by the way. We are also like stressed out and exhausted and just ready for it all to be over. Okay, just a couple of reminders, same as Tuesday. Polyphony is out of town this week, so no discussion sections tomorrow. And the appeal to expertise analysis is due Friday. Somebody had a question for me, and I couldn't remember whether I replied, but they're not here. So they will have to follow up separately. Last time, we had a crash course, like a 10-minute lecture by me on misinformation and disinformation, distinguishing the two based on like whether misleading or incorrect information is being spread intentionally. Talked about 4 different types of stories, 4 general types of stories you find on at least professional news sites. Primary reporting, investigative journalism, analysis pieces, and opinion. There are these 4 categories, but that's really, to some extent, more of a continuum between them, because especially when you're talking about like analysis pieces, for example, they often kind of straddle this awkward line between primary reporting on the one end and opinion on the other. But often these categories will be labeled, at least on professional news sites, so you can get some idea of like roughly where a story should be. Then we started talking about the SIFT method, which is sort of the core of this unit, a technique for evaluating media and information sources. This is 4 steps. We roughly covered, one entirely and most of the second. So the first step was to stop. Check the emotional reaction that something is activating for you, and think a bit about maybe what kind of news story it is, and what kinds of evidence are being presented, at least purported to be presented, and what kind of evidence you might expect. Second step was investigate the source. Our core tool here is the Wikipedia trick, where you take the first part of the URL, you put Wikipedia afterwards, and you use that to find a Wikipedia page, which hopefully gives you information about the organization that this social media item or news item or whatever is coming from. Are there any questions left over about any of that stuff from last time? Okay. So the creator of the SIFT method really focuses on the Wikipedia trick, but as I've taught this unit several times, I actually found another really, really nice resource. This is the Wikipedia sources list. So you can get to it here. I'll also put a tiny URL on the slides in a second. But just to show you what this is not every possible news and information source. That's going to be part of the upshot of the exercise you all are going to do. But these are things that are often at least considered as potential sources to be cited on Wikipedia, especially for news and current events. You can see it's gigantic. And this includes a high-level judgment indicated by the color coding, but also some commentary, and you can like click through. Because part of the way Wikipedia works is, so for most pages, anyone can edit the individual pages, but then there are also editors, people who are more heavily involved, and they have permissions that allow them to get involved, for example, in these surveys and discussions about the acceptability of a source. I just clicked on this one random, so I don't know the whole context for this one, but you can see there's a lot of discussion here, right? Beyond what's in, I think it was this one I clicked on, beyond just this high-level summary, okay? And I find this is a nice complement to the Wikipedia page for the source or the organization itself, especially if it's relatively high profile. Okay. So what I would like you to do is work through these examples, basically. Let me grab a tiny URL. And I will put that, let's put that up at the top here. Okay, you got a tiny URL. What I'd like you to do, basically at your tables, and Devin, if you want to move somewhere else to work on this, that's totally fine. I'd like you to look up these, what do I have, 5 sources on the sources list, and just see what you find. Maybe you've heard of these already, maybe you haven't, that's okay. But look to see what the sources list says about each of these 5 things, and then take some notes, and then we'll discuss. We'll see where we are in maybe 10 minutes or so, a couple minutes for each of these 5. Any questions about what I'd like you to do? Everyone is just way too tired today. One of those days. Okay. I will turn the relaxing piano jazz back on, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Okay. So people are generally ready to come back? Thought all the exams were last week, so we wouldn't be as tired this week. We were just into the final stretch, and so everyone's going to be tired all of the time for the remaining. Okay. I'm going to take control back. Okay, so starting with the nation. Does anyone know, first of all, what the nation is? Is it something folks have heard of, something anyone has heard of before? No one has heard of it before. Okay, so this is a long-standing progressive magazine. Oh, I'm standing next to the speaker, or the microphone. So this is a long-standing progressive magazine. I believe it's been around since is this one of the ones that's been around since before the Civil War? Possibly. Anyways, what does the sources list say about the nation?
Generally reliable.
Mm-hmm. It's given green. It's indicated it's generally reliable. No one was there originally, so you all could reconverge at table 9 if you wanted to, or you can join other tables. Okay, it looks like you're going to reconvene at table 9. Okay, good. So it says the nation is generally reliable. Did you have more, Ayush? Yeah, does it say bias specifically? I forget. Yeah, identify as progressive, partisan source, yeah, so it doesn't use the term bias necessarily, which has at least the implicature of being unreliable. It says it's partisan, but still reliable. You have to keep in mind the point of view that the nation is coming from, but it can still be considered generally reliable. Are there questions or comments on the nation? Okay. Next up, we had reason. Anyone heard of this before? No one heard of Reason before? Okay. So Reason, kind of like The Nation, is a long-standing political magazine turned website. I don't think it goes back, I want to say it goes back to the 70s or something like that. But I don't think it's as old as The Nation, but it has been around for quite a while. Generally from a libertarian perspective. So what did the Wikipedia editors say about Reason? Elizabeth? Generally reliable.
Biased, but still reliable.
Yeah, again, a partisan source. This time they actually use the term biased. Partisan technically means like political party. We effectively don't have a libertarian party in the US, but coming from that distinctive political point of view. This does use the term biased here, but treats that as kind of synonymous with opinionated rather than unreliable. Any other provisos or qualifications that are important for Reason? Elizabeth?
Just that it does say that they mainly focus on commentary analysis and opinion articles, so it would make sense that their coverage would be biased.
Yeah, good. So going back to the four types of news stories, they're not doing a lot of straight reporting. It's going to be a lot more, when they are doing stuff that's not just opinion, it's going to be more analysis from something like a libertarian perspective. Yeah, that's good. Anything else? Okay, and then moving further to the right, we have Fox News. This is an interesting one. So what did they say about Fox News?
Well, for the top one,
Mm-hmm.
when it excludes politics and science, it's generally reliable.
Mm-hmm.
But they say a lot of editors have expressed concerns about the reliability of it and
Mm-hmm.
using it as a source. And then the other stuff where they do talk about science and politics is very unreliable.
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about Fox News is that they break it out into these three different sections, right? News excluding politics and science, then news covering politics and science, and then talk shows, which include some of the most popular shows, especially historically, on not just Fox News, but like cable TV in general. It's interesting, they give this sort of the generally unreliable rating rather than the deprecated, meaning like don't ever use this at all rating. And they say for news excluding politics and science, historically it was treated as generally reliable outside of politics and science, but that's been more contentious in recent years. With no clear consensus among the Wikipedia editors about how Fox News should be handled on issues excluding politics and science. And then a consensus for both politics and science reporting and then talk shows, which are essentially opinion pieces in kind of long form video format, that consensus that Fox News is unreliable for this. There are some qualifications in here. Anyone notice the qualifications? I mean, they get some big paragraphs for these. Ayush?
It says it's marginally reliable for politics and science,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's not a high-quality source. And the talk shows, they actually make an exception for attributed opinions,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really talk about that anywhere else.
Yeah, so if you want to say here is what, before Tucker Carlson was kicked off of Fox News, if you want to say, like, here's what Tucker Carlson thinks, or here's what, I don't know, Stephen Miller, who is sort of the head of Trump's immigration policy, if you want to know what one of those people thinks and they did an interview on a Fox News talk show, that would be okay, but not as a source of news per se. Other things you're noticing here with Fox News? Yeah, Devin.
Well, for the politics and science one, they say you can use in-text attribution. Near the bottom.
Near the bottom.
It's a little lower, it's in blue,
Oh,
which is similar to the top show, but
yes, yeah. So if you have, let's see, so Richard Linson and Judith Curry are two climate scientists who are very, very unusual for sort of rejecting the mainstream view of climate scientists. And so they might end up on Fox News talking about their views on climate science. So you could say, like, on this interview, Richard Linson said this. Or say Jay Bhattacharya, who is now head of the NIH, Stanford medical economist, who sort of involved with COVID skepticism. If he was on there, you could, and did an interview in the context of, say, science reporting related to COVID, you could cite the interview to say this is what Bhattacharya thinks. Good. Any other questions or comments for Fox News? Okay. And then Newsmax. Had anyone heard of Newsmax before? Okay. Yeah, very briefly, immediately after the 2020 election, Newsmax actually overtook Fox News in terms of viewership because Fox News had called Arizona for Biden the night of the election, and a lot of Fox News viewers were very upset about that and switched to Newsmax. It is also my conservative family members' exclusive news source at this point, which is why I put it on the list. So, what does the sources list say about Newsmax?
It's basically saying that they lack the basic etiquette that's involved when it comes to like journalistic standards,
Mm-hmm.
and they're promoting both disinformation and propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
as well as conspiracy theories. So, not the best place to look at. More fear mongering, probably.
Yes. Yeah. The snowball clause thing there, if you read that, basically what happened was they opened this discussion and editors can put in their comments about it. And it was so overwhelmingly negative that they closed it early because there was basically no good defense of Newsmax that was offered. Are there any provisos here? Other additional notes? Okay. Just to make it clear that this is not just picking on conservatives. So the Wall Street Journal is probably the most prominent national newspaper coming from a conservative point of view, generally coming from a conservative point of view. And this one is considered generally reliable for news, with some notes about how you handle blogs and other kinds of opinion pieces here. So it's not that all conservative or right-leaning news sources are unreliable. Okay, so those are the ones that are on here. And then the San Francisco Chronicle is not on the list. Had people heard of the San Francisco Chronicle? Jack?
It's a news source that covers mostly California issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the San Francisco Chronicle is the closest thing. It's one of two newspapers of record in California. Newspaper of record means that if something newsworthy happens, that newspaper is probably going to cover it. The biggest one in California is the LA Times, which just does show up on the list, so it's not good for making this particular point. The Chronicle is a bit smaller, more focused on the Bay Area and Northern California, but it's still more or less the newspaper of record, a newspaper of record for California. You can find stories about like stuff from Southern California in there as well. But it's not included in the sources list. So what should we make of that? Deb?
It's not actually considered a news source, or, oh wait.
That would be one possibility, right? To say it's not on the sources list, therefore we shouldn't consider it an appropriate source. That would be one reaction. Yeah?
Maybe because it's not like large enough and covers a broad enough area. Like most of them were large and more national news related.
Yes.
Smaller and more just California.
Yes. So if you look up at the top, there's like the giant list. If you look up at the top, there's some information about how you should interpret things here, including what if a source is not here? If a source is not listed here, it only means that it has not been the subject of repeated community discussion. This may be because the source is a stellar source. It's obviously reliable. I don't think that's the case with anything here. Or it could mean the source is obviously so poor it never merited discussion. Could mean it covers a niche topic or simply fell through the cracks. And I've never actually used this search the archives to see if anything has come up for the San Francisco Chronicle. But probably because of its focus, it hasn't been cited really heavily. But it could still be reliable. It just means that we have to use the regular Wikipedia trick, spelling Chronicle correctly. And if we do that, we can see pretty quickly, it's been around since immediately after the Civil War. Had the largest circulation on the west coast of the United States, granted in the late 19th century, but recently ranked 18th nationally by circulation in the first quarter of 2021. With a pretty decent circulation for what's primarily a state level or regional level newspaper. So the Chronicle is a generally reliable source. It just hasn't been discussed heavily enough to show up on this list, which was the point here. So we can have reliable sources just in various different ways. They don't end up on the big general sources list. Okay, good. Any questions about this activity? Okay, I was going to put notes on here, but I forgot. So, how do I want to frame this? Okay. So this particular step of the SIFT method relies really heavily on Wikipedia. Like we're learning two different ways we can use Wikipedia to get information to investigate a source. What have you been told in other classes about using Wikipedia? Go Jonathan, then Devin.
Not a reliable source.
Not a reliable source. Why?
Because anyone can edit it.
Because anyone can edit it. Okay, Devin?
I've been told it's a good starting point because you can look at the sources listed, or like where they got their information from.
Okay, so it can be a starting point because you can go to the citations, the list of citations at the bottom. Okay, other things that people have heard? Duncan.
Wikipedia is just outright by itself generally a reliable source for matters that are of clear scientific distinction that are not publicly notable. Like if I go to Wikipedia and want to look up how geomagnetic storms work, if I'm not required to use it in a thoroughly academic context, even if only talking to a academic on the subject matter, that's a good enough source to make a whole bunch of claims because it's not politically contentious. It's not notable enough to get trolled by people who have interest in annoying people. And it is of a clear-cut scientific distinction, so it won't have as much ambiguity as compared to an article still on something science-related, but perhaps more still being researched, like string
Okay.
theory, for example.
Okay, so on scientific topics that aren't heavily polarized or partisan, it's reliable? Is that the really short version?
Really short, yes.
Yeah, okay. And that was something that like you were told in a class, or like an opinion you've developed as you've used Wikipedia?
I've had teachers say it to me,
Okay.
not during class,
Okay.
I don't want students to actually do teachers who I have known well enough to pursue conversations with outside of class.
Okay, okay, yeah. So when you have heard it's generally unreliable because anyone can edit it, that was true when Wikipedia first got started, which was roughly when I was your age, and probably a lot of your teachers around my age are a little older. And so what we learned when we were in high school and college was be very, very wary of Wikipedia because anybody can edit it. What happened primarily over the course of the aughts was that Wikipedia developed really robust methods where, yeah, anyone can edit a page, but there are dedicated editors who handle things like vandalism and ensure that things are properly cited and supported. Today, there's a very robust community that has a few tens of thousands of regular editors who maintain the quality of Wikipedia. There are these processes for community review and evaluation of sources. If you dig down into what's into the discussions behind the sources page, there's actually a lot of procedures that get followed there. And a bunch of content policies as well. So the neutral point of view thing is there again, which I would have concerns with, but that is what Wikipedia tries to do at least. Verifiability and no original research, where the idea is we're trying to always base Wikipedia on other reliable sources that people can verify for themselves if they want to. So this is the basic argument that Mike Caulfield, the creator of the SIFT method, gives for taking Wikipedia to be generally reliable for the purposes of checking sources, okay? Which is the primary thing that he's interested in this context. This is an argument that you could contest, but I find it persuasive personally, and I encourage you to think about this critically, but also take advantage of Wikipedia as this tool. Okay? That said, there are limitations to Wikipedia, and there are respects in which it might not be reliable in certain areas. In particular, the demographics of the editors. The editors are mostly younger, white, highly educated men in Western countries. And so this can lead to sort of distortions or bias or missing perspectives. And there are actually good Wikipedia pages on issues of gender and racial bias and the over-influence, for example, of American perspectives compared to, say, Canadian perspectives. Yeah?
And they have articles about their own
Yes.
editor. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So these limitations are also worth keeping in mind when we're thinking about this. Okay. that's all for this little lecture bit on the question of whether or not Wikipedia is reliable, at least for this purpose of evaluating news sources. Are there any questions or comments on that before we move on to the third step of SIFT? Elizabeth.
Is there any, I don't use Wikipedia, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way of knowing who wrote what or who edited what so you can see any sort of specific bias?
Kind of.
Or is it just like an average?
Yeah, so, okay. So just because the San Francisco Chronicle article is convenient, let me make this a little bit larger. So over here, you can see view history. And this shows, in this case, the most recent 50 edits to the page. I believe if you do this compare selected revisions, this isn't something I do regularly, but you can see exactly what changes were made. Okay, that's not a particularly interesting change. Okay, this is going to be a larger one. So you can see exactly what changes were made. And you can see by who. So in this case, this is a registered user, which I believe, if I remember, I'm almost certain you have to be a registered user to be an editor. And there are like tiers of editors that have the ability to do things like lock pages so that only you need certain levels of privilege to be able to edit them, to mark like a discussion as super contentious and needs to be handled with care, and other things like this. You can also look to see. They have a little profile page. Noting some things that they've edited. It looks like this person is really into, I'm guessing this is football in the global sense, especially in India. I thought there was a handy way to see all of the edits that they made, but I'm not sure about that off the top of my head. However, people can edit it anonymously. So this right here is an IP address. That is the internet address of the computer where someone was when they made stuff. And I believe editors can like adopt pages so that they get notifications, especially if there are anonymous edits. Yeah. Deb?
In one of my classes, we were learning about Wikipedia. They talked about like the 5 pillars of like editing and stuff. And one of the really important things they mentioned is that editors can always just undo what someone else did, and you can go back to a previous version as you're going through. And so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like anybody can edit, but it's really easy to fix if people mess something up.
Yeah, that actually, it looks like that happened here, where this editor, Code Talker, reverted to edits by this, I'm guessing this is an anonymous account that made unsourced additions that were, I don't know, inconsistent with article. We'd have to go and look into that further. But while this was reverted, and it looks like it was done pretty quickly, right? So this 59 minutes later, this problematic edit was reversed. But we can still go and check what was changed. Yeah, so it looks like this anonymous account added this claim that The Chronicle is one of the top 5 paid newspapers in America. It didn't include any sources for that. And so within an hour, the editor removed it. Yeah, similarly here, about claims about its circulation, removed. Other questions, comments, interpretive dances? Okay, moving on to F, finding better coverage. So this is a tweet I found yesterday. OpenAI is reportedly building a social media app to rival X, that is formerly Twitter. The platform will likely feature ChatGPT's image generation tools and a social feed, letting users create and share AI-generated content. You can grab a link to the original post right here if you're interested. The post itself does not include a link. And I mean, you can look up, you can try investigating this source on Twitter or X. But you don't get anything really useful from that. It describes itself as providing crypto news and trading insights with maybe a couple of further links you can follow, but this doesn't seem very promising. It seems extraordinarily unlikely that there will be a Wikipedia page account for this kind of small X account. That there will be a Wikipedia page for this pretty small cryptocurrency account. But we don't have to just sit with this. The idea behind the find better coverage step is that if this is a real thing, we can go out and find better news coverage from sources we already know and regard as reliable, or at least are much easier to check than a small social media account. So I will often just grab the text, grab a relevant bit of text, and I'm just going to throw it into a Google search. You can see I did some checking myself with this yesterday. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the different tabs here on Google real quick. Okay, so by default, your browser is probably set up to go to this all page, this all tab, when you do a Google search, which pulls out top stories. In this case, it didn't pull out an AI summary, but the AI summaries are often put up here recently. And you'll get sort of highlighted sources or paid or sponsored sources here. I actually go to web as my default. I have my browser set up to do that so that I don't get as much of sort of the clutter and the sponsored stuff up at the top. But particularly useful in the context of using the SIFT method is this news tab, which more or less tries to surface news sources rather than just random sites. Okay, so we've got The Verge, Gizmodo, New York Post, and MSN up here. So why don't you each, since it's just been me talking for 10 minutes now, take a minute, pick one of these 4, try the Wikipedia trick on it, unless you happen to already know that, if you're already familiar with, say, Gizmodo, try one of the other ones that you're less familiar with. Just take a minute, try the Wikipedia trick on one of these 4, and see what you can learn about these potential sources. The Wikipedia trick, or you can go to the sources list, either of those. We'll see where we are in about 30 seconds. Okay, so which of the 4 sites did you pick, and what were you able to find about their general reliability? Devin?
I did the New York Post first,
Uh-huh.
and they said it's generally unreliable, especially in politics and fact checking.
Okay.
And it was like made by one of the founding fathers or something.
Okay.
And that's when it was.
And so you were looking at the sources list or the Wikipedia page?
Both.
Both. Okay. So New York Post, not great. Generally unreliable. This isn't a politics story, so like maybe it's okay. But there might be better. One of the other 4 sources on here might be better. This is an important proviso for using the News tab. While it will generally try to surface reliable sources, basically because Google wants to avoid accusations of partisan bias, it will also include things like the New York Post that, say, the Wikipedia editors don't regard as reliable. So just worth keeping in mind that we should check these sources before we click through and decide which one to read. How about one of the other 4? Elizabeth?
I looked up the Verge.
You looked up The Verge.
And it seems like it's pretty reliable specifically for this subject matter.
Yeah, so the subject matter of what again? I looked at this yesterday, but you have to remind me.
It was technology and something else.
Technology news, basically. Generally reliable for technology news. So The Verge seems like that would be a good one to read further. How about Gizmodo or MSN?
Wikipedia said that Gizmodo was a genuinely reliable source when it came to
Mhm.
technology, other than their counterpart, which had AI. I believe there's a consensus that AI-generated articles are genuinely unreliable. So it's Gizmodo's parent company, Geo Media.
Okay. So I actually didn't look up Gizmodo yesterday. Is it saying if there's actual human reporting that's reliable, but we have to be aware of AI-generated articles?
Yeah, but I believe those AI-generated articles are on the parent media
Okay.
account.
Okay, good. So just something we should keep in mind if we go to Gizmodo. And how about MSN, Devin?
It says it's generally reliable, but because it's a talk show, its stuff should be treated as opinionated pieces.
Okay, so potentially opinionated.
Or the talk show content.
The talk, so, okay. This maybe doesn't come from a talk show, but yeah, okay, good. So I did, not quite sure why this doesn't show that I went here. If we go to Gizmodo, so keeping in mind the proviso, we need to avoid AI-generated articles. If we start with Gizmodo, one thing to notice in the second sentence is that Gizmodo is actually re-reporting a story from The Verge. There's a small chance that Gizmodo has some additional information that goes beyond what The Verge reported, but it's much more likely that this is just saying stuff already in The Verge article. So this is re-reporting. This is very common. Actually, I skim through Newsmax every morning, in part to understand what my conservative family members are seeing from their news source. And at least online, Newsmax does a lot of re-reporting from the Associated Press and Reuters, which are very highly reliable. But it's not original primary reporting that Newsmax is doing themselves. They're republishing stories from those places. So this is a case where Gizmodo, it looks like, has probably just re-reported this story from The Verge. And so we should just go to that one directly. And if you read through this, it's actually more or less what was being claimed here in the original tweet, or the original post. Okay. So this is finding better coverage. We started with this really dubious, low-profile social media account that happened to catch our attention because, well, honestly, I was looking for a story that might provoke your attention, and we've been talking a bunch about AI in this class. A small story that caught your attention, it didn't have any link in itself, but we could very easily go and find much more reliable sources that in this case actually confirmed what was in the original post. So this is finding better coverage. We're not dwelling so much on trying to figure out if @cryptoinside is a reliable source and moving quickly to other sources that we already know to be reliable. Any questions about this example? OK. So the next one, TikTok doesn't play nicely with my browser. So I am not going to put a TikTok video in. But I did want to do at least one video. So I found a YouTube short. And be prepared to adjust the volume.
I got fired from my second job because I wouldn't post a ghost job. I used to post ghost jobs. I've made maybe 300 ghost job listings. I've made a lot. I've made so many, it's insane.
Ghost jobs. Ghost jobs.
In 2024, 4 out of 10 American companies posted fake job listings.
Okay, let's say we're looking for a product marketing job in the Bay Area, California. So we'll click on San Francisco Bay Area in the job section, and we'll look for product marketing. It was posted 2 days ago, so that's great. If I wanted to apply to multiple jobs, what I would do is click this All Filters button and then click for jobs that have only been posted in the past month. Scroll all the way down and look for jobs that have under 10 applicants. Okay, that's going to narrow down your search. But now, once you've found a job that you know you want to apply to, after you've applied, I'd go a few steps further.
I got fired from my second job because I wouldn't.
OK. So, especially for seniors, this might prompt an emotional reaction as you're worried about finding a job after you graduate. So what I'd like you to do, we've got a little more than 10 minutes left, it looks like, is work through the first 3 steps of the SIFT method. So stop, think about your emotional reaction, the explicit or implicit claims that are being made, the evidence that's provided or you would expect to get with a little bit of further investigation. You can investigate the source if you want, and you can move to finding better coverage. So we'll see where things are in maybe 5 minutes or so with this. Is it clear what I want you to do? Yeah, Duncan?
So I have one question regarding the SIFT method here.
Yeah.
Because the source that we have listed here is just some YouTube channel.
Yes.
I don't expect to find much news coverage or Wikipedia coverage talking about this YouTube channel.
Yep.
If we suspect a source is too small to have anybody else talking about it, it doesn't seem like it would cause any issues if you just decided to skip that step if you anticipate that and go straight to looking into the claim to see if anybody has spoke about the claim outside the source.
Yeah, good. On the assignments for this, I'd like to see at least a little bit of effort trying to look into it. But if you can give a justification that's like, this account has 30,000 followers. Like, it's a small account. We can move on quickly. That would be OK. Yeah, Devin?
Some YouTube channels like this one, they're linking their LinkedIn and stuff, so you can kind of see, because they say they find the corporate ladder and stuff, so you can kind of see what they work for and verify for yourself if you feel like they have some kind of expertise.
Yeah, so in this case, if I remember right, you follow the LinkedIn profile and there's actually no information, no useful information on there. But yeah, so in the assignment you would say, okay, I looked at this, it's not a really big YouTube account. It does include a link to the LinkedIn, but it doesn't actually identify their employers. Hit a dead end pretty quickly. You know, in just a couple of minutes, you can hit a dead end. So like just explain that and then move on. Okay? So I would like you to take a few minutes, take a moment to kind of think about your emotional reaction, the claims that are being made here. And then you can investigate the source if you want and try to find better coverage about ghost jobs. Oh, Oakley? Okay, so we will check in on this. We'll start with this on Tuesday. Sort of recap what you found, and then there's one more example of this related to a bird flu vaccine thing. I wanted to note this. So this is another quick unit, just 3 classes. And then, so Tuesday we will finish up the SIFT method. We have just a little bit more on this step, and then the final step is trace claims to the original context. So we'll do that Tuesday. Next Thursday, we will start on sort of the paper thing that's going to take us through the end of the semester. I know a lot of you don't do the reading. I will remind you to look at this short thing on writing philosophy papers before class on Thursday. I want you to look at that so that we can discuss it, because it talks about how papers for philosophy classes are quite different from what you might expect. Duncan?
Do you need class on Thursday next week, or do you need class on Tuesday?
Today's Thursday. Tuesday, we will finish up the SIFT method. Thursday, we will start to move on to the paper. So read this short thing on writing philosophy papers for class on Thursday. And then in class, we're going to start working on the first 2 paragraphs of a 4-paragraph paper. So to prep for that and being able to have something useful you can do in class next Thursday, start brainstorming now these things. A topic, a general topic, can be pretty much anything you want. A specific thesis, that is the conclusion of an argument and the argument you're going to make to support it. The background information that someone needs to understand your thesis, because a random class member will have to write an objection to your argument, and so they need enough background to understand the argument. And some relevant, high-quality sources, preferably academic ones, but it's okay if they're not academic ones. Okay? So you don't need those for class on Tuesday, but I'm mentioning them now so you have a week to think about these things. I'm going to also send an announcement to the whole class as a reminder. Think about these things so that you can prepare them to come to class on Thursday. And a reminder, there are no discussion sections tomorrow, so that's it for this week with us. Any questions for next week? Okay, have a great rest of your Thursday and a great weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.